like and subscribe. Do it now.
And welcome back to the latest and greatest episode of the Shaving Points podcast. My name is Jayton May. You can find me on Twitter at JMay56. Joined as always by my co-host Quentin Crisco. And we have a very, very, very special guest today, Jake Louque, talking AFC North. How we doing that, boys?
I'm doing great. How about yourself, Jake? How you doing tonight?
Doing good, fellas. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. We appreciate you coming on. So why don't we just go ahead and jump right in on this thing, looking at the Ravens roster here. So the first thing that kind of stands out to me is the running back room. Like, I see a lot of talent, but like some question marks too with the availability stuff. So from the Ravens perspective, like what are you seeing when you look at this running back room?
Yeah, I'm seeing something that's pretty unsettled right now. And I mean, it's been reported, and there's been some conflicting reports as to whether J.K. Dobbins is a hold-in, I guess you would call it, quote unquote, playing, but under sort of protest, I guess you would say, of his contract situation. We've heard at our podcast that he is seeking a new deal, that he wants to get some sort of bang for his buck here before the next few years of his career, because he has some misgivings about injuries that he suffered. I don't think he loved the strength and conditioning staff, which received not so rave reviews in a more recent Athletic article. And then obviously he had some issues with Greg Roman and his usage in that offense the last couple of years. And he just feels like it's always kind of been there. And watching it from a fans and an analyst perspective, you can tell the talent is there. I mean, when he's out there on the field, he is a badass, and he's one of the best running back talents in the league, but hasn't been able to stay healthy. And then when he has been healthy, I think he has a fair argument that the usage just hasn't been, a very high volume. So it's a weird situation there with him seeking a new contract. Gus Edwards, I'm not as worried about. He's on a pretty manageable contract. They signed him to an extension that I think that was a good deal for both parties. And he didn't look great last year. He had, I think, maybe one or two fumbles, which is pretty uncharacteristic for him. And he was still working his way back from that ACL injury. So I expect he'll be a little bit better version of himself. Maybe not quite as good as he was in years past, but I think he'll be a very serviceable player. And then beyond that, man, it's not a whole lot. I think Justice Hill is still going to be in the mix, who was showing some juice, but has injury issues of his own. And beyond that, really just not a whole lot to get excited about. So it's pretty unsettled, to your point.
I mean, it's only a matter of time before Keaton Mitchell becomes the dude, right?
No doubt. I mean, you got to think so. But no, I mean, like that's sort of what you're dealing with. And I mean, that's kind of what they've been dealing with the last couple of years, is some, guy at the end of the roster to come in and step in for whether it's Dobbins or Gus Edwards, who's been hurt. They had this dalliance with I'm even forgetting the kid's name at the beginning of 2021, who had some sort of breakout game out in Las Vegas in week one. And then he just sort of fell off the map. He had some issues with the coaching staff behind the scenes. It didn't work out. And they've just been kind of filtering guys in and out when Dobbins hasn't been healthy, when Edwards hasn't been healthy. Maybe Keaton Mitchell, I mean, he has connections with the organization in the past. I think his dad played for them, Anthony Mitchell. So maybe the coaching staff or the front office likes him from a personal level, and that's going to help him work his way, if not the P squad, then maybe even the 53 man if guys aren't healthy. So.
Yeah. So my question on this is, with Greg Roman out the door, how do you see this offense going? They brought in Odell Beckham Jr., Rashard Bateman starting to come into his own now. Got Zay Flowers there. Then Mark Andrews, also one of the best tight ends in the league. And you have unanimous MVP in Lamar Jackson. So do you see this team starting to push the ball downfield now, or do you think it's still going to be run heavy? Harbaugh loves to run the ball, so I mean, but he's also a defensive guy or special teams guy technically. But where do you see this offense going this year? Like you said, I mean, I think Dobbins is absolutely incredible, and as a running back, you got to get paid when you have the ability to get paid, because most of the time, like, guys, by the time they're supposed to get paid, they're on the downhill. So it's like you can't really fault them there.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, as far as whereas I see them going a lot faster is the thing. Like Greg Roman, he had a really awesome run scheme, a legendary run scheme that, when you talk to very well-informed X's and O's people around the league, including people like Peyton Manning, say this guy's a great guy. He's got a great run, coordination scheme and everything like that. It's just that the passing scheme was a little bit vanilla, I think, is sort of the general complaint. And I think it holds some water. And then just the procedural issues with Roman were really where I had started to kind of fall off the bandwagon there at the end. And I was a defender of his for a long time, but it just over and over last year and the year before, and probably even before that when they were playing better and they were healthier, just issues with pace and issues with getting to the line before the play clock ran out. Just very basic procedural stuff that you should have nailed down in August and September at the very worst. They were plaguing them deep into the season last year, and I just think that was an issue with verbiage. I think his play calls were too long. I think it was a little too overcomplicated. I think he just tried to outthink himself a little bit or overthink things too often. I think Todd Monken is going to come in. He's going to bring a lot of energy. He's going to bring a lot of emphasis on pace. We've already been hearing about that with reports out of early camps that they have going on, mini camp and stuff like that. So I think it's just going to be an offense that's going to be a lot faster. It's going to be a lot crisper. I think to your point, they probably are going to try and push the ball downfield a little bit. I don't think they had an issue with throwing deep necessarily at times under Roman, but when they didn't have a Marquise Brown last year, for instance, they didn't have that deep threat to be able to do that. So now you have a Beckham in-house. He's got some pace to him. Now you have a Nelson Aguilar in-house. Now you have Zay Flowers in-house. These guys all have the speed to be able to push the ball downfield. And we were talking before we got going here, Lamar Jackson has the arm to make that happen, and he has the football acumen to put the ball where it needs to be. So I'm expecting just a much improved all-around offense.
Yeah, I definitely know where you're coming from with Greg Roman, because as a Cowboys fan, Kellen Moore, it was not the same reasons, but like a guy that you really like, that for some reason, like the flow always seemed off, or like he would call a really good game until he wouldn't, and then like when he wouldn't call a good game, it was like very, very apparent. So no, I know, like, I loved Kellen Moore until I didn't, so I definitely get that
and
idea of thinking.
I like to tell people whenever I meet a Ravens fan, I tell them, "Well, be careful. I'm a Greg Roman truther." So, but so on the wide receiver front, like, I mean, OBJ is outstanding, right? I mean, he is a hell of a football player. I don't think there's any question about that. But do you have any concerns like that? He hasn't played in over a season, and do you think there's any worries around that, or how is he kind of coming along in camp? Is it looking like stuff's going good, or is it kind of up in the air, like he's sitting out still and stuff like that?
Yeah, they're still kind of slowly working him in. He wasn't there for the OTAs back in May, whatever that was, and then he did show up for mini camp, and then he didn't participate a ton in mini camp. He apparently ate some bad fish one night, so like he couldn't get out there. Like he was kind of sick, and I think they're taking it all sorts of slowly and all sorts of carefully with this guy.
I use that excuse all the time to get out of work.
Do what?
I use that excuse all the time to get out of work.
Oh, dude, yeah, same. And maybe that's what it was. Like, and it's funny. Like I actually, I don't know how it came up, but I tweeted, like, Odell tweeted something about boxed wine, and then I kind of tweeted this joke about like how boxed wine's actually pretty good and we should hang out and slap the bag together. And he actually replied to that tweet, and like, so I have a date with him to drink some boxed wine, and so maybe that's what that was. I can't comment on that, but no, yeah, he's like missed most of the time. I think whether it was precautionary stuff or whether it was something where he was like sick and he couldn't get out there. So not a ton of on-field stuff, but it's all pretty positive. He's really connecting with the city in a way that I think is cool to see for a guy who's like super high profile and kind of flashy. Like I never would have expected him to come to Baltimore. Like I would have thought that he would have wanted to close out his career in like a Los Angeles where he had already been, or maybe go back to a New York or go to a Dallas where, things are a little bit flashier and he can like get noticed going into nightclubs and steakhouses and stuff like that. Like there's, Baltimore, I love it, but it doesn't have the glitz and the glamour, but he showed up here. He went out to the Preakness and he did the Riders Up call, and he's wearing the Orioles City Connect hat and stuff like that. He's really connecting in a way that I'm very pleasantly surprised to see, because I thought, like, nothing against him on a personal level. I just thought he, wouldn't have come here for me.
One of the bigger lights.
Yeah, exactly. He's kind of that flashy type of guy, but I don't know. I mean, it's only a 1-year deal, but maybe he's coming here on that 1-year deal to see if this is a place where he could spend the last couple of years of his career, right?
Yeah, I will say that it's not a 1-for-1 comparison, because, I mean, I don't want to get this misconstrued, but Lamar Jackson is a lot like Kyrie Irving in the fact that I feel like everybody that is around him and plays with him absolutely loves him. And then the people on the outside are like, why would you ever want to play with that guy? But you ask any NBA player and they're always like, oh, my favorite player is Kyrie Irving.
No, I think that's you're onto something, and you're right that it's not 1-to-1, but there's some oddities and some quirks with Lamar that there's stuff that you hear behind the scenes, and then there's stuff that's like very apparent, like how kind of funny he is on social media in just an absolute like I don't give a bleep way. Like he just doesn't really care. Like he's just kind of doing his own thing.
I wasn't trying to like compare their personalities, more so as like their play on the field. Like NBA players are always saying like, oh, Kyrie, like you hear it all the time, like, oh, NBA players saying Kyrie is the best player in the league, stuff like that. But then on the outside, the people talking about it, the talking heads are always just like, oh, Kyrie's a cancer, he's gonna kill your team. Like,
yeah, no doubt.
Lamar kind of not the same arguments, but a lot of people are like, oh, Lamar is one dimensional. Like, why would any premier wide receiver want to play there type deal? And then like when Marquise Brown left, not saying he's a premier guy, but I mean, he had nothing but praise for Lamar. And then, I mean, you get Odell Beckham coming in, who's one of the biggest names in free agency. So it's like,
Baltimore has a bit of a history with getting some really high-end receivers in the last few years of their career. I feel like between like Anquan Bolden and Steve Smith, like they had a few guys who
Derek
were really
Mason. I mean that's been Ozzie Newsome. That was Ozzie Newsome's move, starting with Derek Mason in 2005.
Steve Smith was so underrated as a Raven.
He was, yeah. He
like,
had a
people
really
like
good years. Yeah,
people forget how good he was in
Super Bowl
Baltimore.
Run. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, so let's just keep it moving here on looking at the offensive line. So, I mean, Ronnie Stanley's back fully healthy, right? Like that's all good. And I mean, he's one of my favorite tackles in the league. Dude's an outstanding football player. Morgan Moses is like the model of consistency in this league. He doesn't miss games. He just keeps going out and doing a above average job year in, year out. Now behind that, and this is just real quick, this is just more my curiosity than anything. Do you think Daniel Falele has a future in this league, or is he kind of just like riding the pine at this point?
It's interesting. I mean, he got some action last year because Stanley, he is healthy, you're right, and he played most of last year, but there were games last year where he had some issues, and they had such a weird like kind of thing going on with the offensive line where Moses had to stay at right tackle, so they put Falele at left tackle. Like I think a Patriots game where they went and won by like 42 to like 30 or something, and Lamar had 5 touchdowns. I think Falele played like half that game at left tackle in like the 3rd or 4th game of his career, and like he looks solid, but he's just very upright, a little bit stiff. I mean, he's like 6'9", almost 400 pounds or whatever. He probably obviously had to shed some of that to play NFL tackle, but that's a big learning curve. And then obviously he was in a Greg Roman offense where it's kind of your best friend as an offensive lineman. You can get down the field and run game and have fun and all that kind of stuff. But it's going to be a little bit more refined under Monken. It's going to be dropping back a little bit more, I think. And there's going to be more, or not more, but there's going to be a similar amount of 11 personnel, I think. So maybe you'll have some tight ends in there to help him acclimate if he does need to get into action. But now you're hearing these reports out of camp that they're trying him out at guard and everything, which I don't necessarily love that for a young developmental tackle who you're hoping was going to be a tackle. So yeah, we'll see what happens. He's still kind of just a developmental piece right now, and they do this a lot with guys, whether it's on the offensive line, the defensive line, or just somewhere else on defense. Like they'll just pick guys on day 3 and just be all sorts of patient with them, and then in their last year, maybe they'll kind of pop and turn into something, then go get a contract from somebody else. So it could happen with Falele, but I mean, he's he's got all the physical traits to at least be something. I think he's going to hang around rosters for all of his career.
Yeah, that makes sense. You feel like you always see those guys that size who are just they're always ended up on rosters somewhere.
Yeah.
And man, they drafted one of my favorite sleepers this year, offensive tackle Malasela Amve Lau.
He's looking good out there. Apparently, he's getting some run already. So
he was an awesome watch at Oregon. Like I watched a bunch of tape on him before the draft. He was fun. Now on the interior, I got 2 questions for you. Neither of them have to do with Kevin Zeitler because he is just rock solid. But my first one is Tyler Linderbaum. So, and I haven't watched a ton of the Ravens tape on him since he entered the league. But so I'm working off numbers here, just PFF stats that I've got, and they're telling me that he has struggled with pass blocking. So my first question is, how do you feel about his pass blocking? Has it held up, or has it been more like he's a really good run blocker, but not so much in the pass protection? And then my second question is, who's starting at left guard? Is it John Simpson or Ben Cleveland? And why do you think that's the right or wrong decision?
Yeah, when you're talking about Linderbaum, I think he was pretty much as advertised for what you would think he would be as a rookie, and I think he's going to continue to develop and probably become just one of these perennial All-Pro Iowa offensive linemen that the Ravens seem to like. Going back with the Marshall Yanda, I think that comparison was sort of beat to death a little bit, especially because they play different positions. But he did. He's 6'1", guys. I mean, he's kind of small for a center, and that's going to get him into some trouble against some of the bigger D tackles. And he did struggle against some of those guys. The Steelers have some nasty players along their D line. I think he struggled with some of them in certain spots. And then the Bengals obviously have guys that can rip and roar up front. And I think he struggled with those guys too. So there's specific matchups where he's going to struggle, but he's just an all around really good player, maybe comparable to like a Kelsey or stuff. Just gets miles downfield in the run game, really fun to watch. And just, it's a lot of the things that you can't really quantify. All the work that he's doing, the type of kid that he is, I just think he's going to be a really special player. You did just sort of see the growing pains in year one. And I think the size is something that maybe you aren't going to be able to grow out of, but maybe he'll find a way to manage it. Left guard, I mean, that's really the one spot that is pretty unsettled. I mean, Ben Cleveland, man, it's been a struggle. Like they pick him in the third round and he's coming out of Georgia, a very high profile school. It just seemed like the stars were aligning for him to maybe even take that spot as a rookie at some point. And it just hasn't happened. There's been injury issues, there's been conditioning issues, there's been attitude issues, and apparently, like listening to people that are plugged in, it seems like that's still continuing into this training camp. And I mean, you just can't freaking have that, man. When you're a couple years into your career and you've got an opportunity like this, you got to go out and snatch it. You got to take this seriously, and it sounds like he isn't. And I mean, Simpson is getting some run, and listening to the people that are there every day and plugged in, it sounds like he's doing a decent enough job with it. He's doing what you would expect John Simpson in 2023 to do with it, which is not to say that he's going to be an all-pro, but maybe he's going to slot in there and be the starter because it doesn't seem like Cleveland is taking the most of the opportunities being given so far.
Looking at this defense, I mean, stacked back five, front seven. I love Patrick Quinn, love Roquan Smith. I mean, where are we going to get pressure on the quarterback with this defensive line?
It's tough, man. I mean, you're counting on David Ojabo to take a leap, and he did actually have a strip sack in one of the few games that he played last year, which was really cool to see with that Achilles injury that he was coming off of. So you're counting on him to be a guy pretty much from day one as this roster currently stands. I don't know if that's a great strategy or one that I love. You're counting on Odafe Owe becoming a productive player, which he's been solid, but he has not been nearly as productive in the pass rushing department as you would have wanted a first-round pick outside linebacker to be. You need a step from him, or you're going to have to sign a guy. You're going to have to sign a Jadeveon Clowney, or you're going to have to bring back a Justin Houston. And I'm probably more in favor of the latter at this point because Houston knows the defense. I mean, it was a new defense last year under Mike McDonald, but, he played really well in that defense. He looked like he turned back the clock in certain stretches throughout the year. So I'd be fine with bringing him back. And yeah, man, it's definitely counting on a little bit of guys playing up above their potential, whether it's a Broderick Washington or a Michael Pierce here who we have pictured, and Pierce is going to have to be healthy this year and everything, obviously. Or maybe a Justin Madubuike, who is another guy who they picked in the second round a couple years ago. It's looked pretty good at times, but also just been completely quiet during stretches. Like they just need one guy to get a really consistent, good pass rushing season out of where they just go and get 13 sacks. And like, you're not worried about them for long stretches. They just haven't had that. And I don't know if that is going to be an Ojabo or a Madubuike finally as he's approaching a contract situation. But they are certainly going to need it. And they do need more depth here, I think, whether it is going to be a Jadeveon Clowney or you just bring back the familiarity of a Justin Houston.
I will say I'm a big fan of Broderick Washington.
Yeah, I bet.
Red Raider, great.
Good. I mean, like you pick a defensive guy out of Texas Tech, and it's like in the fifth round, and it's like, okay, like I don't really know what we're doing there, but I'll allow it. And then he had like a weird like off the field incident a couple years ago. It wasn't like bad or terrible or anything, but it kind of just went away. And like since then, he's just been quietly like pretty solid along the defensive line. I think he's had a couple sacks and like looked pretty solid. So.
A defensive Texas Tech player is about to win Defensive Rookie of the Year this year, so watch out for that Tech defense.
All right, I'm watching out.
So one guy I can't speak on your D-line. I mean, he's not going to become that 13 sack guy you're looking for, but Angelo Blackson, I feel like in a rotation can be a really solid producer on a D-line. Like watching him in Chicago the last few years. Last year, maybe not so much, but 2 years ago, he impressed me at times, like where it was like he could be that guy who got upfield and got after the passer when you needed him to. But yeah, I mean, when I looked at this pass rush. Basically, I was like, well, Ojabo's got to be the guy here, right? Like it's either that or Madubuike's got to like take another step. And I don't know that much about Madubuike and how he's played, but it sounds like you said it's been flashes, but not like a consistent dominant presence or anything like that.
Yeah, I've talked to you about we were talking about my co-host Spencer, and it's funny because like he's made like sort of the okay, like don't take this super seriously, but there's some Aaron Donald to his game at times, and so I kind of bust his balls about that, and I like bring that up whenever like Madubuike has a big moment. But in all seriousness, he has stretches of like really strong play. He just goes quiet for games at a time. You just can't have that in 2023. You need to have consistent pass rush. You need to be able to disrupt the quarterback a little bit. I mean, and it's funny because, quarterbacks are more elusive than ever. They can navigate the pocket better than ever. It's just kind of street ball out there. So you need guys that have the authority to bring these quarterbacks down, to corral them and just bring them down and just say like, no, you're not getting away from me this time, especially with the Mahomes in the league and all these guys that can move around and have the strength. Like you need a dominating presence, and they don't have it as things currently stand. Hopefully it reveals itself throughout the season.
And how would you describe the Ravens like pass rush? Is it pretty multiple and versatile and like you don't know where it's coming from, or is it more like you're set, you know your job, and you just gotta go beat your man, or something in between?
I'm not the biggest X's and O's guys, but it was very multiple under Wink Martindale when he was here. There was a lot of just creating chaos, overloading one side, doing a lot of blitzing with Patrick Queen, doing a lot of blitzing with safeties, and just complete, like, just no regard. And I mean, you guys saw this when they went and played the Bears in 2021. And, you have freaking Marquise Goodwin one-on-one against, who is that? Chris Westry at cornerback. Yeah. Andy Dalton just heaves up like a Hail Mary, and you guys almost win that game. And like, that was, I think, a 4th and 11. And it was because Wink had just sent everybody 0 blitz, and he just didn't have any regard. He was just a swashbuckling kind of guy. And that was great. It worked out very well at certain points, but they just needed to rein that in. So, they fire him. They bring in Mike McDonald, who's kind of this young hotshot type of guy. But the funny thing about that is, like, he does tend to play things a little more conservatively. It's a lot more base, just bringing the 4 guys and letting guys drop back and sort of do their things at coverage a little bit more. And I think that simplified things for guys on the back end, especially as the season went along and they started to learn the defense a little bit more, where Kyle Hamilton can settle into his role as a rookie a little bit better. And it's a little bit just less pressure all around. So I don't know. I think it's, to your point, it's a little bit more base. It's a little bit more just drop guys and let people take care of their responsibilities, as opposed to trying to just confuse the hell out of the opposing offense.
Absolutely. And then looking at this team top to bottom, so Vegas got them at 9.5 wins, playoffs -150, division at +240, AFC Championship +1100, Super Bowl at +2000. As a Ravens fan, I don't know if you're a betting man or not, but that's kind of the what we do here. But what's your favorite bet here? Do you like the over under? Do you like the playoffs -150? Pretty close to even money. Division at +240. If you're making a bet, what are you looking at here as far as totals and futures?
Yeah, I mean, I might just go ahead and parlay that playoffs and over 9.5 wins. Like, I just feel like with this way this roster is constructed, like, you should win 10 games. And I think John Harbaugh has a pedigree to do that. Lamar has a pedigree to do that. If you win 10 games, you're probably getting in the playoffs. It's a tough division, though, man. I mean, you got the Bengals, who I think are probably going to be the deserved favorite to go and win this thing. And then the Steelers are always competitive. I'm not super sold on Kenny Pickett quite yet, but he had some promising moments last season, and it's the Steelers, so of course he's going to turn into a guy, and we're going to have to deal with him for the next 20 years. But you got that going on, and then the Brownies, man. I mean, they got a little bit of a roster there, and Stefanski is a solid coach, I think. So they're going to be.
I'm interested to see what the Browns do this year.
Yeah, they're going to be competitive too. You're not just going to moonwalk your way to 10 wins, but I think you should be able to do it, and that should get you in the playoffs.
Okay, so. You like over 9.5 and you like playoffs, so we'll call that even money. Parlaying that together, probably
sure.
Pretty close to it.
I got one more question for you on the defense. As an outsider, again, who hasn't watched that much of the Ravens tape, how did they use Kyle Hamilton last year, and how do you think they're going to use him this year, the same way or different?
People were calling him the tight end eliminator last year. He was kind of just a slot man generally, and he would just line up man-to-man against some very good tight ends, and he would just say, hey, I'm 6'4", and I got the frame of a pterodactyl, and you're not going to go anywhere, and it worked out pretty well. It sounds like they're now moving him to more of a traditional safety role, And so, like, when you watch him at Notre Dame, it was a little bit more of a hybrid free safety where he'd be playing over the top a lot. And then, he would come down and do some strong safety type stuff. But yeah, man, it sounds like they're moving him back into a little bit more of a traditional role. And I do expect it to be kind of more of a strong safety, box safety type look, because they've got Marcus Williams, which a lot of people forget is an awesome free safety. He just hasn't been able to stay healthy, or at least he didn't last year. I mean, he started out the year with like 4 interceptions through like 5 games or something like that.
Yeah,
and
his numbers were still great.
Yeah, his numbers were awesome. He came back and, he had another interception late in the year, just a key player for them. So going to need him to stay healthy, and then maybe a little bit more of a traditional role for Hamilton. But I do think they are going to like him a lot in some of these man-to-man matchups with tight ends, especially when the field gets shorter, because he's so big and he's got such length. That he can be used in a lot of different ways, and it's really exciting.
So, are they going to win overseas when they play Tennessee?
I think so. I think the last time when they went to London and they played Jacksonville and got absolutely smoked, I just think that has stayed with them for a long time. I think John Harbaugh called it the worst loss in the history of the Ravens, which is funny because he's only been here for half their existence, and there were a lot of bad losses before him. But man, that was a freaking brutal one. And,
it's crazy that he's been there that long though.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, yeah, he's been here a long time. And he's had a lot of great wins and a lot of bad losses. That is certainly among one of the worst. And I think he is going to have those guys dialed in and ready to go beat the Titans, who they do not very much like.
And who they on paper should be able to handle.
Yeah, I mean, if it's like Will Levis running out there or like Malik Willis for some reason is going to be starting, like I'm not super scared of that. Like I don't know like if Tannehill is going to even be there. I have a conspiracy theory that the Falcons have been loading up to then go and trade for Tannehill during training camp. So we'll see what happens with that. But
no, Falcons are just going to run Bijan at running back or quarterback.
Could be.
So
that's why they drafted him so high.
From the gambling standpoint, like one of my favorite things to watch for is when I can get Harbaugh as a dog. Like it's a great bet. It almost always is. But what's the opposite of that for Harbaugh? Like what are the games that like drive you nuts with him where it's like I shouldn't have bet that if you're a betting man, or like why did he do that? Like what's the ones that I got to watch out for?
Dude, it's like if you've watched the Steelers and Mike Tomlin, he is the exact same coach as Mike Tomlin, where you have the games where everyone in the national media is against them and they've got all this bulletin board material, and then they go in there
and the Chiefs, the Bengals, and prime time and all that.
Yeah, right. And they go in there and they ride the emotional wave and they shock the world, and there's all these like great videos and sound bites of the locker room and them dancing together and like quoting Bible verses and stuff. And then they have the games where they're a favorite and they should go in and beat some like crappy, I don't know, AFC team or just some random NFC team on just like a 1 p.m. on a Sunday, and they just go out there and they just lay an egg. So I mean, it's definitely like the spots where you least expect it is where he bites you. But I don't know, for all the good that he does, you certainly take the bad with the good there. But yeah, that's I would say like if you have a feeling about a random team coming into Baltimore, or just playing Baltimore at home in kind of a weird spot where you're looking at a pretty good value and you like it a lot, I would say go with that. Like the Dolphins loss last year is a great example, or like the Dolphins the year before that was a great example where they go into Miami.
I think I lost money on both of those. I know I lost money on both of those. I think
right. And it's funny, like it's just totally random spots where it's like they're rolling, they're doing really well. It's like Jaguars last year was another one, and Jaguars wound up being a very good team, but that was just another one where it's like, oh yeah, Ravens, they got this one. Let's just when you find yourself going past them on the board that week, and you're like, I don't even need to think about that one. That's when you should.
That's the one you got to worry about.
Yeah.
All right, you got anything else, Q?
Yeah. Just so what? Looking at the schedule, what are the games that you're circling? Like I am gonna be like ready with all my snacks, my beers. Like nothing is getting in the way of me watching this game.
I gotta pull it up. I don't have it memorized. Let me see.
We got it here on the screen for you.
Gotcha. Let me pull that up. Screen. Okay. Yeah, okay. So let's take a look. I mean, I think Houston, that's going to be like a little bit of a coordination. That's going to be a fun week 1 game. I'm always juiced up for week 1, and it's going to be at home. So you mentioned getting popcorn.
Don't sleep on them Texans.
Okay. Yeah, but I'm going to, it's in Baltimore. It's week 1. It's the weather's still going to be nice. I'm going to be in that B word, and I'm gonna be having a couple beers, and we're gonna have some hot dogs, and that's gonna be a good day. That's gonna be a fun one. I always love week 1.
Week 1's awesome.
At Jacksonville, that's looking like a popcorn and crack a couple beers and don't miss that one game. They don't have a lot of primetime games this year, which I like as a podcaster and as a guy who's getting up into my late 20s now, and to what we were talking about earlier, has to get up for work. So it's nice to see, but yeah, division games always within the AFC North. You're always kind of getting ready for those. But I mean, Cincinnati, like those 2 games, no matter what, and especially that first game, like you got to go out there and set a tone and say, hey, we are tired of you guys running this division. We're just as worthy as you. You
got to show up week 2.
Yeah,
got to show up week 2.
Got to show up. And so, yeah, go out there in week 2. And, I expect them to dispatch of Houston pretty easily, to my point. So, yeah, that'll be the one that I circle and say, like, hey, guys, like, are you a threat for this division? And obviously there will be a lot of time to go and prove that after the fact, but it would just be a nice tone setter for them to go out there and if not beat the Bengals, then play the Bengals to your absolute best. So
yeah, assuming everybody stays healthy, which we have to do, but yeah, that week 2 going to Cincy, that feels like about as much of a must win as you can get if you want to get that division.
Yeah, no doubt.
So aside from a must-win standpoint, like just from a listen to the heart standpoint, what's the one team in the division? Because this is a tightly contested division every year, very heated, very like rivalry centric. What's the one team that you're just like,
very
I just want to beat them without any implications as far as like standings?
Steelers.
Do you guys follow soccer at all?
No.
A little bit, but not
loosely.
Do you have an understanding of, like, in soccer there are rivalries that go back like 150 years and fan bases literally don't even understand why they hate each other? That's how it is with the Steelers. Like, and
I was gonna say it's the Steelers. Like
people on a national perspective, it's not, the rivalry isn't what it used to be, but like last year, dude, when they went into Pittsburgh and they started Huntley, and then Huntley got hurt, and Anthony Brown comes in, out of Oregon, and he's like handing the ball off, and they're going on this crazy, what was effectively like a game-clinching drive, just running the ball right down their throat. And then Calais Campbell is like grabbing the terrible towel, and he's like whipping it at the crowd, and he's just like firing the whole sideline up while Renegade is playing. That was one of the coolest moments that I've had as a fan in a while. And ultimately, it's an inconsequential season where they lose a wild card game, but I'm going to remember that one for a long time. And that really reminded me, like, I respect the hell out of the Steelers. The Ravens built themselves after the Steelers model, and it's worked very well. But it's just a mutual hatred / respect type rivalry, and it's never going to go away for us. So that's the team that I always want to beat.
Yeah, no. The game I'm looking forward to here, as far as fireworks, electricity, just fun. I don't know what time it is, but the Detroit game, that's probably one of the most exciting games of the season, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah, no doubt. I think that'll be a fun one. I think Detroit is just like and it's funny.
I love Detroit.
They're building themselves kind of after that same model where it's like, we just want to contend every season. We want to contend in every game. Like, we're done with this rebuilding thing, and whether it's going to be Jared Goff or Hendon Hooker or whatever the heck happens at quarterback by that point in the season, like, they'll be competitive. I think Dan Campbell, he's the kneecap biter, and I think he's going to be competitive in pretty much any game he's in. So yeah, that'll be a fun one for sure.
We don't take Jared Goff slander on this podcast.
Okay. Listen, I got nothing
except for when I'm pushing up against it being good.
Yeah, I was a big Jared Goff guy when he first came into the league. I thought that I was early on the Sean McVay is going to turn this guy into something, and then he did.
So
and then it went
my thing about Jared Goff is, I never argue that he's great. I just argue that he's not as bad as people make him out to be.
Dude, I mean, like, if you go and watch that playoff run that they went on, like in that Saints game, obviously they got away with one there, but he was making some throws in that game in the face of pressure that, like,
he's got an incredible arm.
Yeah, you don't see from guys. Like, he had guys in his face. He's completing these little flip passes. He's completing, like, deep shots down the field. He's got a good arm. He knows where to place the ball. He's just a little immobile, and there's maybe some processing issues. But yeah, he's not nearly as bad as people have made him out to be.
Yeah, my biggest thing is that people act like he's not good, and I'm like, he's fine.
Yeah,
Sean McVay turned on the propaganda
Lions,
machine. Yeah. Sean McVay turned on the propaganda machine, and then it all just like went downhill.
But all right. Well, you got anything else, Q?
No, I'm good. Thank you for coming on, Jake. We really appreciate it. Had a good
Yes,
time
thank you,
talking
Jake,
Ravens
man.
with you.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, boys. It was a fun chat.
Big time Lamar fans here, so
We like
we're
that.
rooting for you.
We appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
All right, man. You take it easy. Thank you for coming on.
Absolutely, guys. Let's do it again soon.
Absolutely.
See
Have
ya.
a good one.